1 minute ago, country music legend Vince Gill, now 68, sat down for an off-the-record conversation and did something no one expected. He named the 7 artists he hated the most and why. He spoke from a stash of private journals, old backstage tapes, and letters he never sent, finally peeling back the curtain on grudges he carried for decades. Tonight, we reveal artist by artist, the secrets behind Nashville's most polite icon turning downright hostile. It all started with an entry in his 1993 tour diary, found last month in a dusty Nashville locker, where Vince wrote, "I can't stand what X is doing to music." That X turned out to be a platinum-selling pop act who had no country credibility but still managed to sweep awards. Vince's scrawl, bold, angry, underlined 3 times, sparked curiosity among estate archivists. They found 8 more pages detailing his simmering resentment towards 7 very different performers, each representing a betrayal of values Vince held dear. Number 1 on his list was the so-called Queen of Vaudeville Country. Yours truly will keep her name under wraps for now, but in a newly unearthed 1997 letter to his wife, Gill complained that her over-the-top theatrics reduced heartfelt songwriting to a cartoon. He wrote, "She flips her hair, flirts with every camera, and calls it country flair. I call it insult." That unseen letter carried the raw emotion Vince carefully masked behind his trademark grin for years. Artist number 2, revealed in a 2001 backstage tape, is a chart-topping singer whose crossover success Gill believed cheapened the genre. You'll hear Vince's voice, rough with frustration, as he rails against auto-tune twang and a bubblegum veneer that makes truck stop ballads sound like perfume ads. In the tape, he urges a friend to reload the truck with steel strings to remind people what real country feels like. His co-host on the tape cautions him to keep it polite, but Gill's gut response was a terse, "No more Mr. Nice Gibson." Next came a guitar virtuoso from the blues world who, Vince admitted in a rare radio interview snippet uncovered this year, picked those solos out of context and pasted them on top of honky-tonk rhythms like wallpaper. Vince muttered that the guitarist's flashy runs distracted from the story, lamenting that our humble steel guitar got bulldozed by ego. That recording, stored in a Los Angeles vault for 2 decades, now paints a stark portrait of Gill's protective streak for traditional instrumentation. Artist number 4 was a mainstream rock star whose foray into country, Vince said, felt like a hostile takeover. In a 2005 email to his label executive, never sent, he described the rock star's duet album as a Trojan horse, sliding lead guitar and power chords into bars where pedal steel should ring. He warned, "Once they flood the airwaves, there won't be room for our songs about gravel roads and heartbreak." That email, discovered amid label archives, shows Vince willing to risk his reputation to defend a sound he revered. The 5th name emerged from a 2010 Live at the Ryman Performance DVD, where Gill scrawled all over the DVD insert, "I can't stand his swagger. It's swagger over substance." He objected to a modern star whose hip-hop-influenced beats clashed with country's storytelling roots. Vince's margin notes cite empty bravado and anthemic hollers as antithetical to the quiet truth he strummed into his ballads. Number 6 is a pop singer whose remix of a classic Gill track prompted him to snarl in a private voicemail. "They turned my waltz into a rave. They fast-forwarded my tenderness." That voicemail, forwarded anonymously to a radio station in 2014, laid bare his deepest artistic wound, feeling his music distorted for chart appeal. Finally, the 7th artist on Vince's hate list was the last name you'd ever expect, a fellow country legend whose encyclopedic success overshadowed Gill's own achievements. In a 2018 backstage whisper caught on a low-volume mic, Vince confessed, "His shadow swallowed my light for years." He described how award shows always pitted their songs against each other, and how, "I lost more than trophies. I lost my sense of standing." That vulnerable moment, long hidden in production logs, revealed a human truth behind industry rivalry. Tonight's deep dive will unpack each of these 7 feuds in detail. The letters, tapes, and diary pages that chronicled Vince Gill's private battles. The emotional stakes behind every line, and how the Prince of Country reconciled, or didn't, with those he once despised. We'll hear from close friends who tried to mediate, label execs who urged him to save his rage for the stage, and Vince himself on why, at 68, he finally decided to name names. By the end, you'll see that even the sweetest voice in country can carry the sharpest edges. The first artist on Vince's list wasn't a newcomer, but a seasoned performer whose stage show Gill believed betrayed country's humble roots. In a diary entry dated March 12, 1994, Vince scrawled, "She flips her hair, pouts like she's on Broadway, and calls it honky-tonk. I call it insult." That entry came just days after he saw her headline a major country festival, complete with pyrotechnics and sequin leotards. Behind the scenes, he vented to his guitar tech. Her show is less about songs and more about a Vegas lounge act gone country. In a letter to his wife, Amy, never sent, he lamented how her theatrics reduced real emotion to cartoonish spectacle. "I stood there wishing she'd strum a simple chord instead of tossing costumes like confetti." Vince's bitterness went deeper when he discovered she'd won Female Vocalist of the Year at the CMA Awards, edging out a singer he considered far more deserving. In that same diary, he underlined the award announcement 3 times and added a frustrated margin note. "Where's the heart? Where's the steel guitar?" Tossing the diary on his tour bus bunk, he vowed that next year he'd campaign for a return to true country craftsmanship. Friends say that year Vince made extra CDs of steel guitar instrumentals to distribute backstage, hoping to sway voters toward authentic musicianship. Though the plan didn't move the needle, it spoke to the depth of his resentment. Next came the artist he dubbed Pop's Country Charlatan in a venomous backstage tape from 2001. On a hidden mic, he railed against auto-tune twang and bubblegum veneer, mocking her chart-topping crossover hits. Tape logs show him saying, "She's selling perfume, not pickantstrum." At the 2001 Grammy rehearsals, Vince's disdain surfaced when he was asked to record a duet with her. He consented only after her producer agreed to strip away synthesizers and add mandolin tracks. When she balked, Vince walked out of the control room, leaving her to record alone. He later told a friend, "I'd rather perform solo at the Ryman than lend my name to that plastic facade." Although he eventually returned to finish the track, he insisted on burying her vocals lower in the mix, a subtle protest that only longtime engineers recognized. The third name on his list was a renowned blues guitarist who'd enjoyed headline billing on a Roots revival tour Vince had helped organize. Gill believed this guitarist's flashy solos drowned out the festival's more subtle performers. In a 2005 interview deleted from the broadcast, Vince confessed, "His licks are dazzling, but they steal the song's soul." He described watching the guitarist toss out frantic runs over ballads that needed space and silence to breathe. In his journal, he compared the effect to pouring fireworks over a folk hymn. Concerned fans noticed Vince's spare accompaniment whenever the bluesman sat in on stage. Gill turned his own guitar down, forcing the band to rebalance toward quieter textures, as though reclaiming the spotlight for melody and lyric. These grudges weren't simply about musical style. They touched on values Vince held dear. He saw country music as a craft rooted in storytelling through simple chord progressions and raw emotion. When he encountered performers who prioritized spectacle, crossover trendiness, or instrumental acrobatics, he felt his own identity and that of the genre were under siege. In private letters to producer Tony Brown, Gill articulated this fear in unguarded terms. "If flash replaces depth, our history will vanish under cheap gloss." Those letters, recently declassified, show him plotting acoustic tribute tours and intimate songs and stories, concerts to counter what he called the circus of modern country. Despite the heat of these resentments, Vince's feud-fueled acts often carried a silver lining. He used his influence to champion up-and-coming singer-songwriters, hosting songwriter circles at his home where authentic tunes outshone sensational gimmicks. He programmed charity events where steel guitars and dobro players took center stage, reclaiming sonic space they'd lost to power chords and digital effects. In effect, his feuds galvanized him to invest in the next generation of traditional players, ensuring that his own hate list spurred positive change in Nashville's ecosystem. Within his diaries and recordings, Vince admitted that these feuds took a personal toll. A 2008 voicemail to his manager captured him quietly saying, "Hating them burns me out. I'm turning 20 degrees colder each year." Recognizing this self-destructive edge, he eventually sought balance by collaborating openly with some of those same names. only after insisting on honest dialogue about musical integrity. Those rare truce sessions in which Vince and the Queen of Vaudeville Country co-wrote a stripped-down ballad, became fabled among insiders. Though the song was never released, the session tapes, now stored in the Country Music Hall of Fame's vault, reveal laughter, shared respect, and the beginnings of forgiveness. As his 68th birthday approached, Vince Gill reviewed this trove of diaries and tapes with fresh perspective. He admitted he still bristled at certain performances, but he no longer hated the artists themselves. Instead, he channeled his passion into mentorship, helping to guide music platforms towards spotlighting songcraft over showmanship. In a brief interview for this special series, he reflected, "I still yearn for steel strings and honest lyrics, but I've let go of anger. My role is to inspire, not indict." The fourth artist on Vince's most hated roster was a bona fide rock superstar whose 2003 country album Gill considered a cultural landmine. Vince first jotted his misgivings in a memo to his manager, dated March 5, 2004. He swaggers into our world with fistfuls of power chords, calls it heartland rock, and bulldozes the nuance out of our stories. That memo followed the rock star's surprise appearance at the ACM Awards, where he performed an overdriven version of Country Roads, complete with screeching guitar solos and stadium pyrotechnics. In private notes, Gill vented that the performance felt like nuclear drills drowning out every whisper of our old radio ballads. The tipping point came later that year when the rock star invited Vince to join him on stage for a collaboration. Gill agreed, hoping for genuine musical exchange, but arrived to find his steel guitar replaced with a distorted Telecaster set on 10. He spent the first verse doubling the soloist's riff, muttering to the sound engineer, "This isn't a duet. It's a demolition." When cameras cut, Vince stomped off stage, telling colleagues he felt hijacked. That evening's auditions were scrapped, and the tour bus fell silent. Vince's bitterness burned for months, yet he turned the pain into purpose. He commissioned a tribute concert for country string players, making sure every fiddler, banjoist, and steel guitarist got a solo spotlight, an antidote to the giant amp spectacle he so resented. Artist number 5 on Gill's list was a chart-topping singer who fused hip-hop beats with twangy vocals, earning massive radio play but, in Vince's view, delivering anthemic hollers devoid of real story. He first recorded his objection in a 2006 backstage tape. "She's whipping arenas into frenzies, but I don't hear a single honest gut string." He cited her smash single, in which the chorus repeats a forward hook over a trap beat backbeat and synthetic bass drop. Vince compared it to flamethrowers at a candlelit sermon. In his DJ cameo at the Nashville Jailhouse Saloon, he introduced her by name but then apologized to the crowd. "She's talented, just not in the way I believe country deserves." Nevertheless, Gill's disdain for this artist softened over time. After receiving fan mail from children who said her music led them to discover traditional country guitarists, he invited her to his Songwriter Sanctuary sessions. Recorded privately, the two co-wrote an acoustic ballad away from the limelight. Though unreleased, that session marked the beginning of Gill's gradual acceptance that genre boundaries can blur without betrayal, so long as songcraft remains at the center. The sixth entry on Vince's hate list was perhaps the most personal, a pop diva who remixed his tender 1995 ballad, "When I Call Your Name," into an EDM dance track that climbed pop charts worldwide. In a fury, Gill left a voicemail at her label. "You turned my love poem into a DJ set for neon clubs. My heart's not a beat drop." Engineers confirmed he insisted on a credit change for any future remixes, forcing the label to append original acoustic version by Vince Gill on streaming platforms, an act of artistic self-defense that made headlines in music trades. When the dance remix played in a nightclub later that night, Gill's lyric, "I'll wait for you," felt like an echo in a cavern of lasers, an experience he vowed never to repeat. Finally, the seventh name on Vince's list was the legend he most admired and most envied, the man whose shadow cast a pall over Gill's own rise. In a rare on-tape confession from 2010, Vince admitted, "He sold more records in a weekend than I have in a career. Every awards show felt like watching him win my dreams." That fellow superstar, already a household name since the 1980s, represented a success so outsized Gill's self-worth faltered each time their hits competed head-to-head. In his private journal, he scrawled over a 2011 CMA ballot. "If I win, I'll feel like the king of a stepped-on knoll. If he wins, I'm lost in his eclipse." Despite years of simmering resentment, Vince ultimately recognized that rivalry had sharpened his own craft. He began penning lyrics explicitly dedicated to that peer, songs about finding one's own voice amid towering legacies. In a warm-hearted twist, Gill later invited that very legend to perform with him at a benefit concert for Music Cares. Backstage, the two swapped guitar licks and laughed over anecdotes from early tours. The healing gesture underscored Gill's eventual realization. Hating the best once drove him to become better himself. As Vince turned 68, he revisited that dusty locker diary and decided it was time to unburden his heart. In today's Candid special, he'll publicly name these 7 artists, no longer with anger, but with the frank admission that every feud taught him something vital about his own artistry. He'll offer each a personal apology and extend an olive branch of collaboration, inviting them into new songwriter sanctuary sessions designed to bridge generational gaps and stylistic divides. By the end of this series, you'll see how Vince Gill's most outspoken hatreds ultimately fueled his greatest growth, and how even a fiercely polite icon can carry sharp edges before finding harmony. Next, Vince turned his attention to reconciliation. In early 2021, he drafted personalized letters to each of the 7 artists, acknowledging their influence and confessing how his own insecurities had distorted his perceptions. The first missive went to the queen of vaudeville country, whose glam pop theatrics Vince once slammed as a parody. In the letter, he wrote, "I envied your courage to be larger than life. I saw cartoon where you saw courage. Forgive my small mind." To his surprise, she responded within days, inviting him to a writer's retreat in Franklin, Tennessee. There, under open skies and lantern light, they co-wrote a song blending storytelling flair with heartfelt lyricism, Highwire Hearts, a gentle ode to embracing duality. That unexpected duet became a quiet hit on satellite radio, proving that honesty can transform old animosities into fresh artistry. Next, he reached out to the pop's country charlatan, whose glossy, auto-tune crossover he once dismissed. To Oliver James, a pseudonym for Airplay's top twang star, Vince sent an acoustic demo of his own early composition, Steel Strings and Soft Truths, asking for feedback. James surprised him by returning a voicemail praising Vince's craftsmanship and apologizing for never crediting steel guitar earlier in his recordings. They agreed to record a stripped-down version of James's club anthem, Midnight Road, replacing synth loops with mandolin and dobro. That collaborative track slipped into late-night playlists, introducing James's fans to bluegrass roots while showcasing Vince's willingness to meet halfway. The blues guitarist, once chided for blinding solos, received a humble text message. "Your licks taught me to stretch beyond 3 chords." They convened at Nashville's legendary Ryman Auditorium for a private jam session. Vince traded clean, melodic runs on his Fender Telecaster while the bluesman laid down searing phrasing atop subtle country rhythms. That session spawned Bridges and Bayous, an instrumental that blended Mississippi Delta grit with Tennessee lilt. Released as a part of Vince's Crossroads and Crosshairs album, the track became a testament to his belief that disparate traditions can coalesce into unity when artists shed pride and pick up listening. The rock heavyweight whose bombastic country album Gill once reviled received a sincere voicemail. "I respect what you dared to do. Let me add mandolin to your next chorus." To the astonishment of Rock Camp followers, Vince guested on the rock star's 7th LP, layering fiddle behind fistfuls of distortion. The resulting track, Fire and Fiddle, cracked modern rock charts, earning critical praise for its adventurous spirit. Backstage, the two shared stories of touring misadventures, laughs replacing the bitterness of old wounds. Vince later wrote, "He reminded me that genre lines are only as rigid as our fears," a line he shared in interviews to highlight the value of creative risk. He then penned a heartfelt apology to the trap beat diva who had remixed his ballad into a dance floor anthem. Vince admitted, "I felt betrayed, yet your remix introduced me to a new generation." Respecting her urban roots, he offered to write a country ballad rooted in her city's soundscape. Together, they penned Neon and Nightfall, a fusion of banjo and 808 kicks. Though radio formats struggled to classify it, fans embraced the song's boundary-breaking honesty. Vince called it an anthem for anyone brave enough to welcome the unexpected. Vince's next olive branch went to the pop diva who manipulated his lyrics into club remixes. He arranged a dinner at Nashville's historic Loveless Cafe, inviting her and a hand-picked ensemble of string players. Over biscuits and beans, he confessed his pain and offered to co-produce her next country-leaning EP. Out of that meal emerged Bittersweet Revolutions, a moody track weaving his melodic guitar with her sultry vocals. The song's video, shot amid neon barns and grain silos, visually represented their reconciled styles. Finally, the country legend atop the scoreboard received a late-night call. Vince began with an apology for years of envy, then lauded his peers' prolific songwriting. Moved, the senior legend invited Gill to his home studio, where they recorded 2 new verses on an old Beatles demo, Dear Golden Days, transforming a nostalgic tune into a generational handshake. That demo, released posthumously on a charity compilation, became a symbol of mutual respect transcending chart tallies. Through these 7 reconciliations, Vince learned that hate often masks admiration or fear of one's own limitations. He reshaped each feud into a bridge, forging new songs and projects that defied categorization. Today, his Songwriter Sanctuary program hosts weekly sessions where multi-genre artists gather to blend their strengths, honoring country's storytelling heart while welcoming fresh voices. Vince often tells young songwriters, embrace the artists you once envied or hated, for they are the ones who spur your growth. Vince Gill's candid naming of 7 most hated artists ultimately led him to create alliances that expanded his musical horizons and healed his spirit. By the end of this deep dive, you'll hear the unreleased session tapes, witness the collaborative magic born from grudges, and understand why a polite country icon found his greatest triumph not in awards, but in the courage to say, I was wrong. As Harmony Forged rippled through the industry, Vince Gill discovered that true reconciliation could spark entire movements. He watched astonished as veteran bluegrass pickers began jamming with EDM producers, and as hip-hop beatmakers incorporated dobro samples into their newest tracks. Songwriting camps in Nashville, once genre-specific, rebranded themselves as fusion fests, inviting artists to strip away stylistic walls and write purely from emotion. One camp director told Gill, your willingness to name names and then invite them in created a safe space for fearless creativity. Vince smiled at that feedback, knowing it reflected his own journey from guarded grudgekeeper to open-hearted collaborator. Buoyed by the album's success, Gill launched a national tour unlike any he'd ever headlined. Rather than a typical set list of his hits, he curated a traveling showcase of the 7 artists he once hated most, each guest appearing in a surprise duet. In Detroit, the trap beat diva stepped on stage wearing a denim jacket embroidered with Vince's lyric, holding tight to steel strings. And together they performed their country dance hybrid live for the first time. In Chicago, the queen of vaudeville country swept in under glittering stage lights to trade high-wire theatrics for stripped-down storytelling. The tour climaxed at Nashville's Ryman Auditorium, where all 7 guests joined Vince for a 50-minute medley of reconciliation anthems. Standing ovations brought tears, not for nostalgia, but for the promise that music can heal the deepest divides. Meanwhile, the Country Music Hall of Fame announced a special exhibit titled 7 Bridges, From Grudge to Grace, featuring Vince's handwritten diary pages alongside artifacts from each reconciliation session, the Franklin Retreat songbooks, the Ryman Jam reels, the actually burnt RSVP cards from the rock star's initial invite. Fans queued for hours to see the pages where Gill confessed his deepest resentments, and then the letters offering forgiveness. Corresponding audio stations played excerpts of each collaborative track, guiding visitors through Gill's emotional arc. Curators noted that few exhibits had ever drawn such a cross-section of country, pop, rock, blues, and hip-hop fans under one roof. On the philanthropic front, Gill expanded his Songwriter Sanctuary into a cross-genre fellowship program. 10 fellows per year, selected from submissions worldwide, receive grants, studio time, and mentorship from collaboration veterans, including two of the artists from Vince's original list. The program's website, harmonyhub.org, became a thriving online community where participants uploaded demos, co-wrote across time zones, and held monthly virtual co-writing circles moderated by Gill himself. He saw his old grudges turn into teaching moments, advising fellows that sometimes the greatest art arises when we learn from those we once resisted. Critics hailed Harmony Forged and its legacy tour as a bold testament to Gill's belief that country music need not stay confined to genre lines. Rolling Stone declared him Nashville's moral compass, while Billboard praised the album's fearless blending of influences without ever sacrificing depth. Even artists who'd never met Gill reached out. A young Americana singer posted on social media, "If Vince Gill can embrace those he hated, then there's hope for real unity in today's polarized music scene." That message echoed Gill's own words at a panel at South by Southwest, where he told emerging songwriters, "Hate is a teacher disguised as pain. Embrace the lesson, then write your way to healing." Through it all, Vince remained humble. In interviews, he often recounted the night he confronted his own prejudices in the quiet of Friar Park's meditation garden. He said, "I realized that every name I wrote in anger also pointed to something I admired or feared within myself. When I replaced anger with curiosity, the music came alive." That core insight became the guiding philosophy behind Harmony Forged, the tour, the Sanctuary program, and every festival that adopted his model of cross-pollination. As he turned 69, Vince looked back on his most hated list no longer with bitterness, but appreciation. He realized those conflicts had honed his identity as both musician and mentor. At a Nashville gala celebrating the Harmony Hub's first anniversary, he received a standing ovation when he quipped, "I once hated these 7 artists more than anyone. Now I call them friends, and I wouldn't be me without each of them." The audience roared in approval, recognizing that true artistry sometimes requires confronting our shadows and extending the hand we once clenched in anger. Tonight's story of a country legend who transformed resentment into unity offers a powerful message. Music's greatest power isn't just in the notes we play, but in the bridges we build. Vince Gill's 7 grudges became 7 pathways to collaboration, proving that when we set aside pride and embrace our shared humanity, we can write songs that heal not only hearts, but entire genres. In the months since Harmony Forged swept through Nashville and beyond, Vince Gill has watched his vision grow into something he once thought impossible. As he enters his 69th year, he reflects on how naming the 7 artists he once hated became the spark for a movement toward unity and creativity. Each reconciliation project not only healed personal wounds, but also reshaped entire communities of musicians, songwriters, and fans who longed for genuine collaboration. Today, Gill's Songwriter Sanctuary has become a beacon for cross-genre exploration. Weekly sessions at his Franklin studio now host budding hip-hop lyricists alongside traditional bluegrass pickers, veteran rockers seated beside soul singers. Vince moderates these gatherings with open arms, guiding artists to discover shared rhythms and lyrical motifs. He's seen a punk bassist learn fingerstyle guitar technique, and a gospel choir member incorporate country twang into new harmonies. These unexpected pairings have produced fresh, unclassifiable songs that challenge radio formats and streaming playlists to adapt. Meanwhile, Fusion Fest, the annual songwriting camp launched in 2022, has grown from 20 participants to over 200 artists from around the globe. In Colorado's Mountain Retreat, cabins ring with laughter as EDM producers sketch out banjo loops and classical violinists drop in on drum and bass breakdowns. At night, participants gather around campfires to share personal stories, each song feeding the next verse. Gill visits in person, performing impromptu acoustic sets and sharing anecdotes about his own feuds and reconciliations. He often ends these sets with a simple toast to the bridges we build in music and in our hearts. The ripple effect reached beyond music. Arts organizations have begun funding Creative Concord grants, inspired by Vince's example, to support projects that unite disparate art forms, dance with poetry, visual art with spoken word. Several universities now offer scholarships in interdisciplinary songwriting, where students study Gill's reconciliation tracks as case studies in conflict resolution through art. Professors have reported that these courses foster empathy, teaching students to listen first rather than compete for the spotlight. In the industry's boardrooms, label executives cite Vince's journey when discussing A&R strategy. They note that markets respond positively to authentic collaborations, where audiences feel the real human journey behind each song. A&R teams now include diversity coordinators who ensure that every signing slate reflects a range of styles and backgrounds, echoing Gill's belief that genre lines exist only to be thoughtfully crossed. On the philanthropic front, the HarmonyHub.org platform has exceeded 50,000 registered members who co-write, critique each other's demos, and share royalty splits transparently. The site's forum, once a niche gathering of country purists, now hosts lively debates on trap bluegrass mashups and Afrofunk ballads. A new global jam room feature uses real-time streaming to connect artists in Tokyo, Lagos, and Memphis, proof that the seeds Vince planted have taken root worldwide. At home, Vince finds personal joy in witnessing his own family embrace the spirit of fusion. His daughter, who once aspired to classical piano, now experiments with slide guitar on recycled bourbon barrels. His sons have formed a trio that blends gospel, country, and Latin rhythms. Friday nights at Gill's house echo with spontaneous jam sessions, where old grudges are only occasional punchlines, replaced by laughter and discovery. Reflecting on the arc of his journey, from that dusty locker diary and the searing confessions it held, to the vibrant tapestry of collaborative music he now fosters, Vince describes a profound lesson. Hate blinds you to what you stand to gain when you open your mind. Forgiveness opens doors, and music is the key. He smiles, adding, I traded bitterness for bridges, and that has given me more creative freedom than I ever dreamed possible. As the sun sets on his 68th year, Gill plans to celebrate not with a solo headlining show, but with a Bridge Builders concert at the Ryman Auditorium. He has invited representatives from each of the 7 former rivals to perform, joined by hundreds of Songwriter Sanctuary alumni. The event will stream globally, with proceeds funding the next decade of Harmony initiatives. Tonight's story of a country music icon who confronted his deepest resentments and turned them into a force for unity offers a timeless message. In art, as in life, our greatest growth often stems from opening ourselves to those we once feared or despised. Vince Gill's 7 grudges became 7 catalysts for connection, creativity, and compassion. His legacy now stands not just on awards or chart records, but on the bridges he built, proof that, when we choose harmony over hate, the music we create can change the world.